The movie starts with a famous researcher named Charles Muntz. Charles spent many years studying different animals and birds. He had loyal dogs to help him with his work. After many years of research, he found a big bird skeleton and told everyone that this amazing bird still lives in South America. But the other scientists didn't believe him. Charles felt insulted and was fired from his job. He then promised to bring the giant bird and prove he was telling the truth. Charles set out with a huge airplane and his faithful dogs to complete his mission. Next, we meet a little boy named Carl Fredricksen one day. While Carl was walking home, he heard a girl's voice in a broken house. He went inside and met a girl his age named Ellie. Ellie was very talkative, while Carl was shy. They quickly became good friends. Ellie dreamed of going to Paradise Falls, a beautiful waterfall. She made Carl promise to take her there one day. Their friendship grew, and they got married. They started living in that broken house. Sadly, Ellie couldn't have children because of a health problem. Carl comforted Ellie and promised to fulfill all her dreams. Carl reminds Ellie of her childhood dream to visit Paradise Falls. They start saving money for the trip. Carl works in a park, selling gas balloons. However, whenever they save money, something comes up and they have to spend it. Sometimes it's for car repairs, sometimes it's for fixing the house. They both grow old over time. One day, old Carl is working at home and sees a picture of Ellie as a child. He remembers their dream of going to Paradise Falls and realizes he hasn't fulfilled his promise to her. Carl decides to buy 2 tickets to Paradise Falls with his retirement money to surprise Ellie. He buys the tickets and takes Ellie to their favorite spot under a tree on a hill. They have spent a lot of time there since childhood, but Ellie is too old and can't go on. She suddenly falls to the ground, so they don't go to Paradise Falls. Ellie gets very sick, and Carl often reminds her of their childhood to make her happy. Ellie eventually passes away, leaving Carl all alone. He wants to spend the rest of his life remembering Ellie. But soon, a big problem arises. A big company buys all the land around where Carl lives. The company wants to build a big shopping mall where Carl lives, but Carl refuses to sell his house because it holds all his memories of Ellie. The company keeps offering more money, making Carl very irritable. One day, a young boy named Russell comes to Carl's house and says, "Hello, my name is Russell, and I'm a wildlife explorer." Carl closes the door in the boy's face, not wanting to be bothered. But the boy knocks again and repeats, "Hello, my name is Russell, and I'm a wildlife explorer." Carl tries to shut the door again, but Russell stops it with his foot. Carl has to listen to him. Russell explains, "I'm a wildlife explorer. There's a competition at our school, and if I help an old man, I'll get a badge and become a senior wildlife explorer." Carl realizes the boy is very stubborn. To get rid of him, Carl lies and says, "Every night, a bird comes and destroys all the flowers in my garden. Go and find it." Russell goes to look for the bird. Just then, Carl sees a construction vehicle break the mailbox in front of his house. This mailbox was painted by Ellie herself, so Carl gets very angry. He runs outside and pulls the mailbox from the man's hands. The man says, "Mr. Fredricksen, I'll fix it. I'm very sorry." But Carl, still angry, hits the man on the head with his walking stick. The man falls, and his head starts bleeding. Scared, Carl goes back inside his house. After a while, the police arrive. The court doesn't pass any sentence on Carl, but tells him he must stay in an old-age home where he will be cared for. That night, the police bring Carl back home. The police tell Carl that people from the old-age home will come to take him away the next morning. Carl doesn't want to leave his house because it's everything to him. The next morning, 2 men from the old-age home arrive. Carl tells them, "Wait a minute, I'll be right back." Shortly after, the men see thousands of gas balloons flying over Carl's house. Carl has planned to lift his house with gas balloons and fly to Paradise Falls, where he promised to take Ellie. Now, the house is flying into the sky, and everyone is surprised to see it. Carl's house flies over the town, and he steers it towards Paradise Falls using the curtains of the house. Sitting peacefully on his sofa, he thinks no one can bother him now. But then, he hears a knock on the door. Carl thinks he must be hearing things because he is in the sky. But the knocking continues. When he opens the door, he sees Russell, the boy from the previous day. Carl is shocked. Russell explains that he came to Carl's house last night to catch the bird and fell asleep in the basement. Carl is annoyed but lets Russell in. Carl decides to lower the house so that Russell can go home. He cuts some of the balloon ropes, and the house starts descending. But then Russell spots a huge storm coming towards them. Russell immediately calls Carl, who runs and tries to move the house away from the storm. But the wind pulls the house into the storm. Everything inside starts getting wrecked. Carl rushes back and forth, trying to protect the things Ellie had bought. The storm gets stronger, but after a while, it calms down. Russell tries to wake Carl by pulling his cheeks, thinking he might be dead, but Carl wakes up. Russell then says, "I have a GPS, and it shows we are now in South America." Carl doesn't believe him. Carl cuts a few more balloons, and the house starts descending through the clouds. Then they see a high mountain passing by. Both Carl and Russell are scared. The house lands on a high hill and starts moving forward. Carl runs and grabs a pipe, trying to pull the house back, but it's no use. Russell grabs Carl's leg and hangs on, but they still can't stop the house. They reach the edge of the hill, and it looks like they might fall, but luckily, the house stops just in time. Russell pulls Carl up the hill. Carl looks around, confused about where they are. Then the clouds move, and sunlight reveals a beautiful waterfall in front of them. It's Paradise Falls, the place Carl promised to take Ellie. They arrived early because of the storm. Scientists believe many ancient animals are hidden here that modern humans do not know about. Carl tells Russell to climb up the pipe and cut a few balloon ropes so the house will come down. But Russell can't reach the top, no matter how hard he tries. Carl then decides they can pull the house to the waterfall. He ties Russell with a rope and ties himself to the house using the pipe. Together, they start walking towards Paradise Falls, in the forest. Some dogs are chasing an animal, but the animal cleverly escapes. These dogs have collars that let them talk like humans. They belong to Charles Muntz, the researcher from the beginning of the movie. Charles took a strange creature's skeleton from this jungle. The strange creature is a huge bird, but it's very clever, and Charles hasn't been able to catch it for many years. Meanwhile, Russell and Carl are walking in the forest. Russell gets very tired and goes to relieve himself in the jungle, where he sees some footprints. He thinks they might belong to the bird Carl mentioned, the one that ruined his garden flowers. Russell claps and calls for the bird, but can't find it. As he takes out a chocolate bar to eat, a bird eats it. Russell calls the bird with more chocolate, and after a while, the bird comes out. Russell is very surprised to see such a huge bird and takes it to Carl. Carl gets angry and scolds Russell, but the bird and Russell quickly become friends. The bird flies towards Carl, and Russell tells the bird that Carl is a good man. Russell names the bird Kevin. Carl doesn't want Kevin to stay with them. He's already annoyed with Russell and doesn't want more trouble. Carl tells Kevin to leave, but the bird just mocks him. Carl moves ahead, and Russell secretly gives chocolate to Kevin, so the bird keeps following them. After walking some distance, Carl hears a man's voice on a secluded hill. He and Russell are shocked and go to find the man. Suddenly, a dog with a talking collar appears. The dog introduces himself as Doug and says he's looking for a bird. Kevin attacks Doug, but Doug is kind-hearted, so Kevin doesn't harm him. Doug belongs to the researcher Charles. Now, Kevin and Doug follow Carl and Russell. Carl is annoyed. First Russell, then Kevin, and now Doug. Doug tells Kevin he'll capture him, but Russell doesn't understand why. Carl tries to get rid of Doug and Kevin by throwing a ball and chocolate, but Doug and Kevin find them again. Night falls, and it starts raining. Doug wraps himself around Kevin's legs and sleeps. Russell tells Carl about his father, who used to love him but now doesn't spend time with him. Russell feels bad when his father doesn't come to school events. Carl feels sad for Russell and remembers Ellie, wishing for her help. The next morning, Kevin gets on the house and shouts. Doug says Kevin is looking for her chicks, and her home is on the other side of the hill. Russell realizes Kevin is a female bird. Kevin says goodbye to Carl and Russell and leaves to find her chicks. Charles's other dogs find out Doug is with the bird. The dogs form a group and find Carl and Russell. The dogs take Carl and Russell to a cave with a huge plane inside. Charles comes out of the plane, much older now. Carl tells Charles he has been a fan since childhood. Charles is happy and tells his dogs not to harm them, treating them as guests. Carl and Russell board the plane and see Charles's discoveries. The dogs put a shame cap on Doug because he couldn't catch the bird, making Doug very upset. Charles tells Carl and Russell that he came to catch a huge bird alive or dead to prove to modern society that he was right. Russell mistakenly reveals that the bird they have is huge. Carl tells Russell to be quiet, but Charles realizes they're hiding something. Kevin, hiding in Carl's house, starts screaming. Charles sees this and gets very angry, thinking Carl and Russell are trying to stop him. He orders his dogs to kill them, but Carl manages to escape with Russell, taking the house with them. The dogs chase after them, but Doug helps them find a way out. Kevin picks up Carl and Russell on his back and starts running. Russell falls and is almost attacked by the dogs, but Doug tries to protect him. They reach the edge of a hill, and Kevin stops, but the house keeps moving. Carl picks up Doug and Russell, and they all fly over the hill. A dog bites Kevin's leg, but luckily the dog falls. Russell bandages Kevin's leg, and Carl feels upset. Russell convinces Carl to help Kevin find her chicks. They walk through the jungle with Kevin. Charles's dogs report back that they couldn't catch the bird. Carl, Russell, and Kevin reach Kevin's home, but Charles arrives with his plane and crew. They trap Kevin with a net. Carl tries to cut the net, but Charles sets Carl's house on fire to stop him. Carl abandons Kevin to save his house. Russell is angry with Carl. Charles takes Kevin prisoner and leaves. Carl puts out the fire and Russell is upset, accusing Carl of not caring about Kevin. Carl drags his house to Paradise Falls, but feels no joy. Inside, he finds Ellie's diary filled with their happy memories. On the last page, Ellie writes, "Every moment I spent with you was adventurous. Now you too find adventure in your life." Carl realizes he was selfish and decides to save Kevin. He finds Russell tying balloons to fly and save Kevin. Carl throws away his cherished belongings to lighten the house, making it fly again. Doug joins Carl, and they fly to save Kevin. Russell crashes into Charles's plane, but is captured by the dogs. Charles throws Russell off the plane, but Carl saves him by attaching his house to the plane. Carl and Doug sneak into the plane to free Kevin. Carl uses a ball to distract the dogs and locks them out. Russell fights off the dogs attacking him. Charles confronts Carl with a sword, but Doug tilts the plane, saving Carl. Doug takes control of the dogs. Carl and Kevin climb the stairs, but Charles follows. Carl kicks Charles, but Charles grabs the stairs. Russell tries to help, but Charles shoots at them, causing the house to descend. Carl saves Russell and fights Charles. Carl uses chocolate to make Kevin run, taking Russell and Doug with her. Carl loosens the house's rope, causing Charles to fall with the balloons. Carl's house is lost in the clouds. Russell apologizes, but Carl reassures him, saying, "It's just a house. You're all safe." That's the biggest return I got. They return Kevin to her home, and her chicks play with Carl and Russell. The next scene is a program at Russell's school, where he will be given a badge as a senior wildlife explorer. Russell isn't happy because his father hasn't shown up. However, Carl is there, and Russell is overjoyed to see him. Carl then gives Russell a special badge, the same badge that Ellie had given him when she was a child. They eat ice cream together, and Carl now has Charles's plane for future adventures. The story ends with Carl and Russell finding new adventures together. So how did it feel about today's movie? Please let me know in the comments section. If you like the video, please do like and share the video. Coming soon with another awesome movie story. Till then, goodbye and take care.